Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Dominique Rodriguez-Sawyer about leading HR during times of transition and change. Dominique Rodriguez-Sawyer, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have this conversation. We've been preparing for this for a little bit, and you really have a unique and interesting background working for an interesting organization. So we'll get more into that in just a moment. But I think you bring a lot of expertise around the people space, particularly, in your role as Chief People Officer, but looking at leading HR during times of transition and change, which we're smack dab in the middle of right now. Everyone is living this each and every day, the disruption of the pandemic and virtual work and everything related to that, but also just everything in relation to the shifting nature of work and disruptive technologies, in fact, impacting HR and people management within organizations. I mean, there's so many different things that we could focus our attention on today, but we definitely are going to be talking about transition, change, and some of those, the things that need to be done to manage the HR function and the people management issues within an organization, as we're dealing with difficult times. As we get started, I wanted to share Dominique's bio with everybody. As the Chief People Officer, Senior Director of HR and Administration, Dominique Rodriguez-Sawyer is responsible for the overall strategy, development, and implementation of HR programs and administrative operations for FARE, F-A-R-E. And I'll let you describe more about your organization here in a moment. She has over 15 years of experience in fostering the relationships between HR management and senior leadership of nonprofit and government agencies. Her primary focus is employee relations, workforce planning and recruitment, regulatory compliance, as well as facilitating training programs that improve organizational excellence and nurture the aptitudes of high performance. Dominique has a bachelor's degree in political science and French from Franklin Pierce University and graduate level certification in training and development from North Carolina State University. Again, welcome to the podcast. It's wonderful to have you. Before we launch into the conversation, anything else that you would like to share by way of personal background or context?
Oh, no, thank you very much for this opportunity. I think you've pretty much covered it all. A little bit about how I got into HR, because many times people ask me, they'll say, well, you started on one route. I really had a passion for training. And as you shared, I went back and got my graduate level certification in training and development, and then started working in corporations in their training departments within HR, which later led me into working with employee relations teams and becoming an HR corporate partner, which led to where I am today.
Yeah, and that's actually how I got connected with HR initially too. The training and development piece was really what caught my attention and interest. And then over time, I got connected with all of the different areas and continue with my education. So that's interesting that we have a similar kind of aptitude and interest. I think it sounds like. Well, yes. So Dominique, I think as we launch into this, it's interesting to consider all of the challenges and changes that organizations are facing. And you've experienced managing HR needs during times of complete organizational turnaround. I would love to hear a little bit more about that. Um, what were some of those challenges that you faced during that time? And then we can tie that into the pandemic and some of the issues around that. Oh, but actually, before we do that, can you tell us just briefly about FAIR, the organization you're at, and what you do? And then we'll talk about uh, managing HR during a turnaround.
Okay, sure. FAIR is the world's leading premier organization on fighting food allergies. There are 32 million Americans living with potentially threatening food allergies. So, our mission here at FAIR is to enhance the lives of those individuals, empowering them to lead safe, productive lives, with the respect of others. And we do this through a number of ways, through education, advocacy initiatives, as well as improved awareness around healthcare options and treatments. So that's a quick snapshot of all that we do.
Excellent. And I appreciate that. It sounds like a wonderful organization doing really important work. Now, tell us a little bit more about this experience you've had when you're dealing with an organization going through a complete turnaround, big scale change.
Okay. In 2018, FAIR underwent a significant reorganization. It wasn't an easy feat. And I have to tell you, Jonathan, it's probably one of my greatest challenges. First, 45% of the organization was being laid off. So you can imagine crossing my mind were thoughts on how would we maintain morale and continue moving the needle on the critical work of the mission. What can often happen in situations like these that individuals living through a reorg can become frozen and unsure about their future and thereby becoming less productive. So you have the case where there are individuals leaving the organization, you have those that are there, and it's almost like everyone becomes stuck. Additionally, our incoming CEO was evolving FAIR's business approach from a typical nonprofit to a very energetic startup. So, the most important thing to me was that we treat our outgoing employees with compassion and respect. I mean, they had invested a lot of themselves into it, so it was important that we do that. I would suggest that for any organization going through this, to put a plan in place to offer assistance to the departing employees. So that could include a whole number of things, outplacement services, compensation packages, recommendation letters, etc., things of that nature. But then don't stop there, because for those remaining, we had to be honest with them and explain the plan to move FAIR forward. So my additional guidance to those to any organization going through this is that at every step where it's possible, involve the staff as stakeholders, giving them input into the direction and actions that leadership is taking. In our case, we valued staff commitment to seeing the mission of FAIR continue to forge ahead with it by taking into consideration their voice. By doing this, you're optimizing your opportunity for success.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. And I actually had a somewhat similar experience, not as in a role like yours, but I was on the board of directors of an organization that was going through a similar transition of a nonprofit to more of this kind of learning organization, tech startup space,
Mhm.
and fundamentally shifting the nature. I mean, some of the core products of the organization remain the same, but there were a whole new slate of products and services that were being developed, and really the positioning of the organization just shifted, right? And moving again into really considering the organization, which was a 40-year-old organization, really moving into like startup space and,
Mhm.
and innovation. And it's hard. It's really
Yes.
hard. It's hard on everybody. So I can relate to some of what you're describing, and being in the weeds and the daily grind of going through that transformation. I can only imagine how hard that would be. I only saw it from the, from the 1,000-foot view from the board of directors. So that's really great. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the advice that you would give to HR leaders when they're going through similar types of challenges within their organization. Maybe not a nonprofit moving into more of a startup kind of a mentality, but
Yeah.
we all deal with change and with disruption and transition, and perhaps it's even just in how we deal with it during times of the pandemic.
Right. Okay. Whether it's during times of pandemic, when you're going through changes, oftentimes, and I guess I'll talk about it in the sense of transitions for organizations. You have to make morale like one of the top priorities that you focus on. I know there's so much going on. You're busy deciding, okay, is this product or this event or XYZ, are we going to continue that? That's important. But remember that you need individuals, you need the people, you need the staff to make any idea, any movement that you're about to go through happen. So keep morale in the forefront and top of mind. As changes occur, you can do that by continually checking in with your staff and seeing, getting a pulse. And don't forget the HR staff too, because they're the ones that have to check on the team. And so make sure if you're a leader that you're checking on that group that you have there responsible for the team. Secondly, I would say advice that I would give is a clarity of mission. So once you know exactly what you're going to be doing, be forthright about the direction that the organization is heading in. I'd have to say that one of the things that our new CEO did when we went through our transition is that she explained in a town hall format the plan to move FAIR forward to everyone. And, that plan was going to take away some events, some things that, individuals were very tied to. But you have to be frank, you have to be honest, and you got to let them know where you're going. I think another item, and finally for me, is figure out the resources needed to up level the skill set of those staff that remain. So, I have a bias towards training. So, getting staff the necessary training they need to prepare them for the new business environment. Because some of the individuals that are there, they're going to be like, wow, we're heading this way. Well, that's not the skill set that I came in. Am I going to survive? Again, if you're not careful, you're going to have people freezing. So you don't want that to happen. And I would say, as part of the plan that you're going through this transition, you need to think about the necessary training to prepare them for the business environment. Now, the pandemic added another layer. So I would also suggest that you think about the mental effects that the pandemic has had on individuals, because once you go through a transition, that's one thing. But the pandemic brought about all of these restrictions, where you weren't able to go to some of those outlets you may have had in the past if your organization was going through a change. So when I say pay attention to the mental health, we have like an employee assistance program. A lot of organizations can get that. It's a place where employees can go outside of HR, sort of have a neutral person they can talk to and sort of open up, let loose and explain things that they're undergoing that they may not feel comfortable letting us know. But I think it is the responsibility of an organization to provide that sort of resource.
I'm excited to announce the publication of my new book from HCI Press, The Alchemy of Truly Remarkable Leadership: Ordinary, Everyday Actions That Produce Extraordinary Results. Consider how the nature of work has shifted over the past 50 years. With increased globalization, rapid technological advancement, and the shift in economic composition, the average job of today looks very different than the average job of 50 years ago. What will the jobs and organizations of tomorrow look like? Moreover, what does this all mean for organizational leaders? What are the core competencies and capabilities of organizations and their leadership that are prepared for continued disruption and geopolitical and socioeconomic shifts? Regardless of what the future holds, increasingly, leaders need to be socially minded, data-driven, decisive, champions of talent, and disruptors of the traditional notions of leadership, teams, organizations, and work. The Alchemy of Truly Remarkable Leadership will help you to explore your own leadership competencies and capabilities and consider ways to apply and implement them into your workplace and personal life.
Yeah, I agree. You spoke to all of your tips there and suggestions. I think were spot on, and focusing on morale and focusing on the needs of your people, the mental health needs in time of pandemic and social isolation and just everything around working remotely and just the stresses of the day. I think that's of particular importance. And then I think about the context of this past year. I mean, it wasn't just the pandemic. We've had a lot of social unrest this year, political. It was a stressful time in the U.S. A political campaign process, a presidential year, and a lot of stress around that. The Black Lives Matters movement and the George Floyd moment, and a lot of these, racial and social justice issues coming to the forefront that people are paying attention to, causing stress and strain, in addition to all the pandemic stuff that we're dealing with, and organizations trying to pivot. I like how you mentioned, that we can't forget about the HR staff while we're considering the needs of our people. And I've seen that at some organizations I've worked at where, it's like the HR people are the ones going around trying to help everyone and fix everybody and make sure everyone's taken care of, but who's taking care of the HR people? So let's not forget about that. And because that's also very important. Well, I was wondering though, I think, with all the great expertise that you have, I think also the lived experience that you have as a senior Black female HR professional, I think that's worth noting as well. And I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of your own personal experience just this past year and dealing with some of these broader social issues and how they've interfaced with your role as an HR professional in the workplace.
Yeah, thanks for that opportunity to talk about that. I've been in the industry a long time as a Black female professional. I feel like my colleagues and I, we've made progress. As you shared, many of the, Black Lives Matter, the news events, we've really seen organizations step up to the plate, but there's still much more to be done. Recently, I heard the following statistics that 1 in 5 C-suite executives is a woman, and then only 1 in 25 is a woman of color. So the numbers speak for themselves, but movement towards change is there. Honestly, when I started out, there were very few women of color in leadership roles that I could turn to and discuss their own professional progression. That's improved now, but if with the Black Lives Matter movement, I needed someone to talk to and say, okay, how would we approach this? That wouldn't have been there. That wouldn't have existed for me. And other questions that I might have had to ask when I first started out, how do you navigate this situation? Or how do you bypass being, bypassed for a promotion? There's a cultural savviness and understanding that you greatly benefit from when you're mentored by someone similar to you who has been through it. And at one point in my career, I finally had the privilege of working with a Black female VP. She was brilliant, a top performer. But what became apparent is that, she would do twice as much work, receive half the recognition. She had to fight for equitable pay even after surpassing her goal. And when I broached the question, or others broached it, since she was clearly making a difference to our bottom line, the response was vague. So she was viewed as being too brash or outspoken. Now, think about this. For the three young Black professional females on our team, in viewing her experience, as VP's experience, there was this subtle message being conveyed to my younger junior staffer self at that point. Listen, be careful. You can't be your authentic self. You can't trust that you'll be paid equitably or that your work will fairly be recognized or appreciated. And even today, I'm still hearing those comments. And those comments, a lot of times now, are being like magnified because of all of the social unrest that we went through. I think people are being more expressive in terms of voicing that they are experiencing this. But as I told you, I do think the pendulum is slowly swinging. You know, personally for me, in regards to equity, now I'm participating in meetings where there's genuine listening. I don't think that was the case 15, 20 years ago. It's twofold. There's both listening and accountability from leadership. I see efforts now within organizations to be intentional and transparent with their staff about asking them their feedback and acting upon it. It's not just a series of surveys that are taken and then stuffed in some drawer. There's more of an alignment of actions to words. We've done this at FAIR in my own organization. Within the community, one of the things that we really champion is equitable access for high quality care for all patients living with food allergy. But we're also advocating for that same access for our staff and our board. So FAIR's working towards being inclusive and having diverse representation at all levels of the organization, from our board to our senior leadership to staffing. So employees want to see themselves represented in the leadership. So we're working diligently in this space of living what we preach in regards to diversity. I mean, we recently had this 3-part virtual roundtable that I participated in on diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, where we spent time discussing human resource and talent building practices in DEIA, which led to FAIR's blueprint for access. So those are some of the things I'm doing. I've seen my experience as it's gradually evolved in this area.
Thank you for sharing that. As a middle-aged straight white dude, I can't begin to really understand the challenges that I'm sure you've faced throughout your career. I appreciate you sharing that, though, in your perspective. And I'm wondering I should say I'm also glad that it seems like things are moving in the right direction. I wish they were moving more quickly. But they do seem to be moving in the right direction, so that's a positive, and I guess we can build off of that. But what's your hope for the future of HR? Not just your future, but the future for all women of color, and for HR as a profession as you move into this unknown future. And how do we strive for greater equality in the workplace, and just make sure that we're treating everyone with appropriate dignity and respect that everyone deserves?
My hope is that this dialogue on HR equity will not become, HR equity in business will not become just a topic amplified for a moment in time, and that this conversation and relevant actions will continue. So, we're heading down the right track. And I think that if we sort of let up, that's how we'll lose this momentum that we now are on. I guess this additional concern I have is that at one point, DEIA will no longer be the topic of discussion, and everyone's going to move towards a new shiny object, and it won't work. This is not something that will change overnight. It is, it's a progression. You have to progress towards this change. Like you and I are having this dialogue right now. We're each gaining a better understanding of each other. Equity and diversity, it has to stay top of mind on the agenda. And HR professionals like myself, we must dedicate ourselves to that end of sustaining and consistently advancing this imperative, because real change in equity takes time and effort. So we just can't let up. We just have to keep going so that we can see the fruits of this time and effort.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I appreciate your optimism around this topic and these issues. I appreciate all the perspective that you've provided and the insights, around related back to your expertise in dealing with some of these challenges as well. Dominique, it has been a real pleasure talking with you today. The time has flown by. We're about to the end of our time, but before we close, I did want to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can get connected with you, find out more about what you're up to, and then just give us the last word on the topic for the day.
Yes, thank you for that. I am always happy to talk to anyone who has any questions. That same mentorship that was given to me for a brief period of time, I'd like to extend that to others. So you can always reach out to me at drsawyer@foodallergy.org. So we continue this conversation and have many more. Like I said, I think we just need to continue to keep this top of mind. Sometimes if we have each other as to lift each other up, I think that will help make the process easier. But it's an important dialogue that we can't discontinue. We must continue forward with it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I encourage listeners to reach out, get connected with Dominique, find out more about what she and her organization can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.
We are excited about the launch of HCI's new magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine designed to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We will be publishing issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Check out the first issue and let us know what you think. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.